Drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed in the silence, a maddening metronome marking the passage of time. Or was it marking time lost? He no longer knew for sure. Time had become fluid, a shapeless, formless entity that slipped through his grasp like grains of sand. He had stopped counting the drips long ago, stopped trying to calculate the hours, the days, the years. Years that bled into one another, forming an indistinguishable mass of grayness. 25 years, a quarter of a century. Or was it? The thought gnawed at the edges of his mind, a persistent itch he couldn't scratch. 25 years since they took him, since they locked him away in this cold, sterile box. A concrete tomb designed to break him, to erase him, to leave him a hollow shell. He pressed his hand against the rough stone wall, the coolness a stark contrast to the burning memories that flickered behind his eyes. Memories that were both vivid and distant, like scenes from a life lived by someone else. Someone he vaguely recognized but couldn't quite place. He looked down at his hands, the skin pale and papery, crisscrossed with a network of blue veins. They were the hands of an old man. Was this what 25 years did to a man? Or was it the isolation, the endless solitude that had aged him beyond his years? He ran a hand through his hair, surprised to find it long and scraggly, a stark contrast to the neatly combed style he vaguely recalled from his past. He no longer had a mirror, but he could feel the hollows in his cheeks, the lines etched deep around his eyes, the map of a life etched by suffering. His reflection stared back at him from the metal plate that served as his only plate. A gaunt, haunted face framed by unkempt hair and a beard he no longer bothered to trim. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were now dull and lifeless, reflecting the emptiness that had become his existence. He was a shadow of the man he once was, both physically and mentally. The isolation had eroded his memories, blurred the lines between reality and imagination. He clung to fragments of his past, precious shards of a life that seemed to belong to someone else, a life he desperately wanted to reclaim. "Are you ready?" The voice, soft and melodic, sliced through the oppressive silence, sending a jolt through him. He whipped his head around, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't heard another voice in, how long? Years? Decades? "Who's there?" he croaked, his voice raspy from disuse. The only response was silence. Had he imagined it? A trick of his mind, starving for any form of human contact? "Are you ready to remember?" The voice whispered again, seeming to come from the very walls themselves. He scrambled to his feet, his legs shaky from years of confinement. He pressed his ear against the cold, damp stone, his senses on high alert. "Remember what?" he called out, his voice echoing in the emptiness. "Who are you?" The voice didn't answer, but he could feel its presence, a tangible entity in the suffocating darkness. It was a promise and a threat, a beacon of hope and a harbinger of fear. He didn't know who or what was speaking to him, but he knew one thing: he couldn't ignore it. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt a flicker of hope. The voice, whether real or a figment of his fractured mind, had awakened something within him, a spark of defiance, a will to fight against the suffocating darkness that threatened to consume him. He scanned his cell, his eyes tracing the familiar cracks in the ceiling, the chipped paint on the bars, the rough-hewn stone floor. He had memorized every inch of this prison, every imperfection, every shadow. But now he noticed something he hadn't before. A faint glow emanated from beneath the heavy metal door, a soft, ethereal light that pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. He had never seen this light before. Had it always been there, hidden in plain sight? Or had the voice somehow unlocked something, revealed a path he was meant to take? Cautiously, he approached the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the rusted bars. The metal was cold and damp against his skin, sending a shiver down his spine. He peered through the narrow gap, his eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light. The corridor beyond was shrouded in shadows, the source of the ethereal glow obscured by the darkness. But he could feel it calling to him, beckoning him forward, promising answers to questions he had long forgotten how to ask.